There's a popular long-running television show, let's call it The Blimpsons. Now, I would love to show a clip from The Blimpsons, but I don't want to get hit with a copyright strike, so I'm just going to describe it. There's a character on the show, let's call him Groundskeeper Billy. Groundskeeper Billy has got a peculiar way of speaking. In particular, he's got a peculiar way of insulting people. He will take a long chain of words and throw it at somebody, where every word in the chain represents a different aspect of the person he wants to insult. For example, he once referred to the people of France as cheese-eating surrender monkeys. It's funny, but it's mean. Now, there's one scene in particular where Groundskeeper Billy goes into Principal Winner's office, and the two of them are arguing about something, I don't remember what. And Principal Winner, he wants to come back at Groundskeeper Billy. He wants to insult Groundskeeper Billy using Groundskeeper Billy's own linguistic style, so he says, you guff-speaking-work-slacker. It's a funny scene. It always made me laugh. And now, when I look back on it, it makes me think of the German language. Why? Because the German language loves chaining words together like that to form compound nouns. There's no limit to how long the chain can be in German. It can be arbitrarily long. The most famous cliched example of a really long word in German that's actually used in the language is Rindfleischetikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz, which is an actual word in German, believe it or not. This looks intimidating at first, but as we'll see, it can actually be kind of fun. So, let's talk about compound nouns in English and German and see how the two languages contrast and compare. This is Lernen und Fahren. Rindfleischetikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz. Try saying that 5 times fast. Wow. What a beautiful day it turned out to be. Alright. 3, 2, 1, action. Compound nouns. Let's talk about the English language first. Now, in English, we have 3 options for writing compound nouns. There's the so-called closed style, there's the so-called hyphenated style, and there's the so-called open style. Let's look at each one. The closed style is where we write words smushed together with no spaces or hyphens in between, as though it was one word. For example, airport, or motorcycle, or wallpaper, or lighthouse. Originally, these were all 2 separate words. But over time, because they got used together so frequently, they became smushed down and effectively became one word. Now, the English language is generally slow to adopt new closed-style compound nouns. Why? Because most English language purists don't consider a new word to be a real word until it appears in a print dictionary, and most print dictionaries don't accept new words until they hit a certain critical mass of usage within the population. So if you invent a brand new compound noun, that's great, but you've got to get a few million people to start using it regularly before it will be considered a real word. Now, I keep putting real word in quotes because there is, in fact, no standards body that decides what constitutes a real word in the English language, so maybe it's not a big deal. But generally, when you introduce a brand new compound noun, you hyphenate it, like cheese-eating surrender monkey or guff-speaking-work-slacker. And over time, if enough people use that compound noun, it might change from the hyphenated style to the closed style and get written all as one word. Or maybe not. There are some hyphenated style compound nouns that are always written hyphenated. For example, passerby, or father-in-law, or lady-in-waiting. All of these words are written in the hyphenated style. Why did these ones never get changed over to the closed style? There's no rule that says they have to, so they just never did. Now, the third style in English is what we call the open style. An open style compound noun is where we write it with a space in between the words, but it's treated as one word in the sentence. For example, swimming pool, or post office, or fish tank. These look like 2 words because there's a space in between them, but it's treated as a single logical unit of language. Now, an easy mistake to make here is to confuse the open style compound nouns with a noun phrase. Be careful, because these are linguistically 2 different things. What's a noun phrase? A noun phrase is a noun that is surrounded by supporting words. For example, look at that tall, beautiful mountain. Now you might be tempted to think that tall, beautiful mountain there is being used as an open-style compound noun, but it is not. It is 3 words. It is 2 adjectives modifying a noun. This is an important distinction, but it's sometimes a very subtle distinction. For example, if it's really warm outside and I'm walking my dog, I might say, I have a hot dog. But if I'm hungry, I might say, I think I'm going to eat a hot dog. In that first example, the phrase hot dog is being used as a noun phrase. It is an adjective modifying a noun. I have a dog who is literally hot. But in the second example, I want to eat a hot dog. It's a compound noun. It's an open-style compound noun. It's 1 word. Now this can lead to some confusion in English because you can phrase things in a confusing way, like it's possible in English to eat a cold hot dog. That sounds like an impossibility. That sounds like a contradiction. But it isn't, because the word hot in that sentence is not an adjective. It is not a separate word. It is in fact part of the compound noun hot dog. So how do you tell the difference? Well, it's usually, hopefully, obvious from context. But if it's not obvious from context, you can take a look at where the stress goes in the sentence. It's the difference in English between saying, I'm going to eat a hot dog, versus saying, I'm going to eat a hot dog. One of those sounds very different from the other. In a compound noun, the stress tends to go on the first word. Whereas in a noun phrase, there is no particular stress unless you want to emphasize something. For example, look at that tall, beautiful mountain. I stress beautiful because it genuinely is beautiful, but there doesn't have to be a stress in a noun phrase. You can just say, I have a hot dog. No stress. Okay, great. But enough about noun phrases. We're talking about compound nouns. We have 3 different types of compound nouns in the English language, or 3 different ways of writing them anyway. Who decides which compound noun goes to which type? And is it wrong if you use the wrong type for a noun? If I wrote father-in-law with spaces instead of dashes, is that really wrong? If I wrote hot dog with a hyphen instead of a space, or if I wrote it as a single word, is that really wrong? It depends how strict you want to get with the rules, but when the rules are kind of fast and loose and not very well defined, maybe it doesn't matter so much. That's all well and good, but how does this compare to German? Actually, I'm going to pull over here. Let's continue this in a minute. Now that's all well and good, but how does this compare to German? In English, we've got the 3 options for writing compound nouns: open style, hyphenated style, and closed style. In German, there's only 1 option. It's what we in English would call the closed style. The Germans do not mess around with this. If we're going to treat it like it's 1 word, then by God, we're going to write it like it's 1 word. Don't give me none of those spaces, don't give me none of those hyphens. We're just going to smush it all together. This can result in some crazy, complex looking words, like that big one I rattled off at the start of the video. But once you get into it, you'll find it's not as bad as it looks at first glance. Now, in German, unlike in English, when you form a new compound noun, your new word is automatically considered a valid, real German word, even if your word has never been written down or spoken in the history of the German language. You don't have to wait for it to show up in a dictionary before it's considered valid. I mean, there's a couple of spelling rules you have to know. Sometimes you have to stick extra letters in between words in a chain, but you can pick that up as you go. And generally speaking, newly formed compound words in German are perfectly valid, unlike English. So imagine an entire language where you can walk around like Groundskeeper Billy and make up new words on the fly, and those words are perfectly legitimate. It's pretty fun. Now there's 3 ways to form compound nouns in German that we're going to look at in this video. The first is you can combine an adjective with a noun to form a compound noun. For example, alt means old and bau means building. So Altbau, 1 word, is old building. Kühl means cool in the sense of temperature, and Schrank means cupboard. So der Kühlschrank literally means a cool cupboard, but semantically that's their word for refrigerator, literally a cupboard that is kept cold. Now I'm going to take a brief sidetrack here to mention that compound adjectives are a thing also in both languages. You can take a noun and smush it on to an adjective to form a compound adjective. For example, der Hund in German, the dog, is a noun. If you smush it onto müde, which is an adjective that means tired, you can say things like Ich bin hundemüde. Literally, I am dog tired. That is also an expression in English, or at least that is an expression in British English. I don't know if I've heard that one too often in North American English, but dog tired means really tired in both languages. And notice that we said Hundemude. There's an E in between Hund and Mude. That's one of the spelling rules you've got to learn. But back to compound nouns. The second way in German to form a compound noun is to combine a verb with a noun. The way this works is you take the infinitive of a verb and chop off the en, and then take what's left of the verb and just smush it onto a noun. For example, schwimmen is to swim, and das Bad is the bath. So combine those together, you end up with das Schwimmbad. Literally the swimming bath, but semantically that's what they call a swimming pool. Schreiben is to write, and der Tisch is the table. So smush those together and you end up with der Schreibtisch. Literally that is the writing table. But semantically that's their word for desk. Literally just a table where you do your writing. Great. Now the third way is to combine a noun with one or more other nouns. This is what most people think of when they think of compound nouns. You think of those really long, crazy words in German, and you break them apart and find out that it's like 5 different nouns all smushed together. There's no limit to how long the chain can get. There was a German girl on YouTube, I can't remember her name, but she sat down one day just as a fun exercise to try to invent the longest possible German word she could think of that actually means something. And she came up with a word that, I kid you not, it takes 60 seconds just to say this word. I'm not even going to try to recite that one here because it would be hopeless, but I will try to link that video in the description below if I can find it. It was a pretty fun video. Now the fact that there's no length limit to the chain of nouns that you can form in German means that effectively it's impossible to compile a comprehensive dictionary of all possible words in the German language. Why? Because it would be like 1 trillion pages long. You would never get to the end of it. In this respect, the German language is kind of like those toy bricks that you played with when you were a child. You know the ones. There's like 6 or 7 different types or shapes of bricks, but you can combine them together in an almost infinite number of ways. You can build almost anything with those 6 or 7 basic types of bricks. The German language is similar in that once you learn the individual component words, you can combine those words together in an almost infinite number of ways to form almost any compound noun you can think of. It's kind of fun once you get into it, and it's a great way to build vocabulary. Not just building up these words, but also trying to parse out and understanding them when you see one that you've never seen before. If you come across a really scary looking word, instead of backing away from it like, oh my god, I mean, when you're a beginner to the German language and you see one of those words, it just looks like a big jumbled up mess of letters. You can't make heads or tails of it. And it's intimidating. It makes you want to say, I can never learn this language, it's way too much for me. But once you start to build your vocabulary, you get to the point where you can recognize the individual words and you can say, oh, wait a minute, okay, I know what that word means, I know what this word means, I know what these words mean. If I put them all together, then the compound noun might mean something like this. And then you go online and look it up to see if your guess was correct, and you find out, oh my god, I was right? Endlich kann ich die deutsche Sprache verstehen? Ausgezeichnet! It's a good feeling is what I'm saying. Now at this point you might have a couple of questions. For example, let's say I form a new compound noun in German, but I do it with individual component nouns that each have a different grammatical gender. How do I know what is the grammatical gender of the new compound noun? Who decides whether it's a der word or a die word or a das word? Well, this leads us to the easiest rule in the entire German language. Seriously, of all the rules you have to memorize to learn this language, this has got to be the easiest one. Here it is. The grammatical gender of a compound noun is determined based on the grammatical gender of the last noun in the chain. That's it. It's an arbitrary choice. They could have picked the first noun, they could have picked the second noun, they could have picked the longest noun, they could have picked the shortest noun. For whatever reason they said, no, it's going to be the last noun in the chain decides the grammatical gender of the compound noun. And then they applied that rule everywhere. This rule is remarkably consistent. I cannot think of a single exception to this that I've ever seen in the German language, which means it's really easy to remember this. If you want to know the grammatical gender of a compound noun, you just have to look at the very last word in the chain. And that word's grammatical gender is the grammatical gender of the compound noun. A similar thing goes for plurality. If I want to pluralize a compound noun with like 8 different nouns in it, do I have to pluralize every single noun in the chain? No, just look at the last word. If you make the last word in the chain plural or singular, you make the entire compound noun plural or singular without changing any other word. It's really great. Now to close out this video, I thought we could do some sample exercises where we look at actual compound nouns in the German language and try to work out what they mean just by looking at the component words. Let's start with a couple of easy ones, words that you've probably heard before in German. Let's start with a really easy one, Kindergarten. Kinder means children, and Garten means garden. So kindergarten literally, does that mean it's a garden where we plant children and watch them grow? Well, yeah, figuratively. A kindergarten is a classroom setting where you can put a bunch of little kids together and they have a safe environment where they can learn and grow with each other. So in a sense, it is like a garden where we grow children. Okay, great. How about das Motorrad? Well, you might recognize the word motor is motor in English, or engine. And das Rad is the wheel, so a motor wheel. What is that? Well, if you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know that I'm riding one right now. Das Motorrad is a motorcycle. They call it a motor wheel in German. I love that word. Let me hop on my motor wheel. Yeehaw! Now we could look at some funny examples too. How about du Schweinehund? What is a Schweinehund? Well, das Schwein is the pig, and der Hund is the dog. So Schweinehund is pig dog. It's not a nice thing to say to somebody, but it can be pretty funny if you use it jokingly with your friends. Ach du Schweinehund, ich hasse dich. How about der Handschuh? Die Hand is the hand, and der Schuh is the shoe. So what is a hand shoe? Is it like a shoe that you put on your hand? Well, yeah, kind of. It's their word for glove. A glove is like a hand shoe. It's like a shoe for your hand. Ah, okay, that's funny enough that it sticks in your memory and you can remember that. How about a tricky one? What is a Kettenraucher? Raucher means smoker. It comes from the word rauchen, which means to smoke, like to smoke a cigarette. And die Kette is the chain. So what is a chain smoker? Oh, we have that word in English too. Think of it like, again, not literally, you're not literally smoking a chain, but figuratively, like the links in a chain, one after the other after the other. When one cigarette ends, you light up the next one. You're a chain smoker. And notice that we add an N in between those words. We don't say Kettenraucher, we say Kettenraucher. That's another one of those spelling rules. Now, unfortunately, every now and then, you're going to come across a compound noun where, even though you recognize every word in the chain, you still can't understand the meaning of the compound noun. It's a mystery. For example, die Eselsbrücke. Well, okay, die Brücke is the bridge. Und der Esel is the donkey? So, a donkey bridge? What is that? In order to understand this one, you need a brief history lesson. In the olden days, peasants used to transport goods on the back of a donkey. And donkeys are notoriously stubborn animals. They're also very cautious animals. Apparently a donkey won't cross running water. If you have to cross a stream or a small river, even if it's not very deep, even if it's not very wide, the donkey will absolutely refuse to cross it. So you have to walk in either direction to get to the nearest bridge. But what if the nearest bridge is 4 kilometers upstream? I don't want to have to walk 4 kilometers just to get to a bridge to cross this stream and then walk 4 kilometers back just to get to the other side of this stream. Come on, donkey, it's not that deep, let's just go. But the donkey's like, no, I'm not gonna do it, no way. So they used to build these little bridges specifically for donkey traffic. They called them eine Eselbrücke. And that word became synonymous with like a shortcut. The term has stuck around long after, I assume they no longer build actual donkey bridges in Germany anymore, but the term has stuck around, and specifically in modern times, it refers to like a mental shortcut. It's like a trick that you use to remember something. In English, we would use the term mnemonic, or mnemonic device. In Germany, they call it eine Eselsbrücke. And, ironically, the word Eselsbrücke itself is a mnemonic device, because now that you've heard that story, it's crazy enough that it kind of sticks in your memory, and the next time you see the word Eselsbrücke in German, you will immediately remember that story and say, oh wait, I know what a donkey bridge is. It's like a mental shortcut that helps you remember something, just like the word Eselsbrücke just did. Now that's one of the many things I love about language learning, not just the German language in particular, but language learning in general, is that as you're going through and learning these new words and new terms, you get these little unexpected history lessons or culture lessons, which can be really interesting, and it makes the whole experience kind of fun. Now just to reiterate a point I was trying to make earlier, when you're new to the language and you come across one of these long words, it looks really scary, really intimidating, but you can break it down, you can actually make a game out of it. It's kind of like a word find puzzle. By approaching it like that, like it's a game, it can make it more fun and engaging, and it's a good way to build your vocabulary and build your skills in your target language. Okay, now I'm going to stop there. I could easily make this video 4 hours long. I will happily stay out here all afternoon talking about compound words in German, but who's going to watch that? So let's cut it short there. If you've got a favorite compound word in German that I didn't mention in this video, or if you found a funny one or a really long one, please post it in the comments below because I love seeing new ones. But that's all for this video. And now, one more time, just for fun. Rindfleisch, Etikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz. Nailed it!